Like, what was so good for me was to understand, how do I encourage the youth of this nation to follow Christ? How powerful is it when somebody listens to a song and they can identify and they say, hey, I need that God.
Between the Grooves is hosted by James Curtis, music director and morning man in the Greater Toronto Area on Joy Radio. James Curtis talks to artists and industry insiders to discover the connection between music and faith. You can connect with the show at faithstrongtoday.com/betweenthegrooves or via Twitter @betweengrooves.
Between the Grooves, we are back. Episode 227, your look at music, ministry, and everything in between with today's top Christian artists. Joining me once again, Ayiesha Woods.
Hello, hello. How y'all doing?
I'm doing good, and everybody else is doing good because they're listening to us.
Yes, indeed.
Today's episode featuring none other than Evan Kraft. He already has 3 Dove Award nominations under his belt, tons of streams, lots of views on YouTube as well. And we're going to be talking about the fact that he's a newlywed, got married in September of last year. Talk a little bit about his musical career. He's been in the music business for many, many years, but sometimes you don't hear about newer artists until they start getting radio airplay or they get so big on YouTube or streaming services and whatnot. But this guy, I would say the best way to describe him in one word is an evangelist.
Yeah, indeed. Have to agree with you there.
The conversation that we're going to be sharing with you in just a bit, evangelism plays a big part in it. This guy, his first album, so he's an English-speaking guy.
Right, raised in California.
Right, and his first album is in Spanish. Go figure, eh? And I just love what he has done with his music, that Latino influence. There's been a lot of that over the last few years. We've talked about country, the country influence. We've talked about the gospel influence. We haven't really talked about the Latino or Spanish influence.
Right.
I mean, who's out there that's come out with Spanish songs, whether it be partially Spanish or just some of the lyrics are Spanish or the whole thing is Spanish?
Probably Jordan Feliz.
Yeah. Danny Goki's done some stuff as well.
Goki has.
Now, his wife is Latino descent or something like that, so that probably helps.
I believe so.
Yeah. And I know he tries to speak Spanish, but he's not very good. But he acknowledges it, and don't get me, I don't know a word of Spanish, right?
You know what's funny? Just even talking with Evan, his R's, he's got it down. He's listen, if you didn't know any better, you'd think he was just Latino by birth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, he's spent enough time in South America that he must be pretty much bilingual, like 100% bilingual. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who else? Torrin Wells has done some stuff, I believe.
Yes, he has. I think once you spend any considerable amount of time in Texas, you have that Latino influence.
You think?
Oh, yes. Yes, every bit of it.
I would have thought that Texas would be like a country vibe or something.
Country and Latino.
And so where's gospel?
Certainly.
Because that's the home of gospel, isn't it?
I don't know.
Or is there a home?
I don't know.
Is there a home of gospel at all?
Somewhere here in the U.S., maybe Detroit, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Now, you were not born in the U.S., were you?
I was.
Oh, you were born in the U.S., but you were raised where?
I was born here in the U.S., in Bermuda.
Okay, so
the Caribbean influence is quite prevalent for me.
So do you know any Spanish?
Believe it or not, my sister is a Spanish teacher.
Okay.
And she was born in Bermuda.
Oh.
But she, having a sister who teaches Spanish and living in Texas, living in Florida as well, being born in New York, all of these places with very strong Latino influence.
Right.
Yeah, I know a little Spanish. Poquito.
Poquito. In Canada, the official languages are English and French. So we take French in school, and you take it up to grade 9 or 10 or whatever. I think after that, you can decide to still take it or whatever. And I I apparently aced French when I was in school, but I can't remember much of it.
No kidding.
Like I could probably speak a few words here and there and remember some stuff. Well, there's one of the words I can remember, and maybe some very short sentences, but not to have a conversation. With somebody. Because the French language is so fast,
right,
and very expressionist as well. Like you got to use your hands and stuff, and I'm not one that use my hands all in the air. But
I do, I think. And I speak in English.
That must be the Spanish influence, right?
Something.
There you go. Well, this is a great conversation that we want to share. Evan Kraft, this guy is phenomenal. I just love his heart. And, and we're going to get into this now, and you don't want to miss any part of this. Evan Kraft on Between the Grooves. Hello.
Yeah.
And we started snapping too, just for the fun of it.
Well, because I wasn't getting any of the meter. And so, yeah, but the headphones work great. All right.
Well, you sound great.
Well, Evan, it's great to have you on the show. Where can I start? I guess, first of all, congratulations. It's a late congratulations on being a newlywed husband. You got married last September, I guess?
Yeah, September 17th.
And
we're 7.5 months in.
Yeah. And so what's that been like? It's always a transition, right? When you first get married, and of course everybody's asking you when you're going to have kids and all that other stuff. How's it going?
Well, yeah, we were talking about that this morning. Yeah, that's obviously something that we're excited for, and we don't know when exactly that'll happen, but it's been amazing. We just we woke up early today, went and ran. So we love to do exercise together, and so it's been amazing. We're learning how to live together, which I was 30 when I got married, so I had lived in. I lived in my house where I decorated everything like a bachelor.
Right.
And it looks a lot better now. It looks a lot better.
That woman's touch.
We moved into a new house where we could decorate together, and there's rugs now. Never had rugs.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's amazing.
I remember when I got married, that was many, many years ago, and it was the same sort of scenario. I was kind of the bachelor living in a basement apartment. My wife was still living at home with her folks, and so we got the place a month before we got married. Maybe it was even more than that, a couple of months. So we were able to start furnishing the place and everything else. But I remember when we just got married, we didn't even have proper bedroom furniture. It was the mattress on the ground.
Yeah. We did that. Yep.
Yeah. And then you slowly build, it's time to buy a dining room table with some chairs, and you start shopping around for that, and everything from the curtains to the,
Well, the last year, it's been impossible to get furniture. So we've had to it took us 6 months to get our bed. They were just, super long waits on everything.
So you've been staying awake for 6 months straight. Wow.
Yeah. No, it's great. We got our whole house painted now. I just would never have done this. And it's wow, this is it looks like a magazine.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
That's awesome.
How does she feel about your music career?
She's a very passionate woman. So she has a lot of thoughts on a lot of things, which I love, because I'm a very passionate person as well. And Rachel really loves, her name's Rachel, and she loves, I think she loves music more than I do, listens to it more than I do. And she loves to see me in my element. And, I led worship yesterday at her parents' church. And it's really fun to be able to do that stuff together. And she's been able to travel with me. I got to go do a little tour with Mercy Me, and she was able to come and see some other really, big things in my life. So that's been incredible. And she's very, very, very supportive.
How did you guys meet?
Rachel was a missionary in Mexico, and maybe something that we're going to talk about today. The first 8 years of my career in basically all my 20s were in Latin America in Spanish. And so I was hired to go do a festival. It was like a evangelical outreach where they did like medical tents and they were helping people in a lot of different ways. And they had a call to salvation at night and a concert. Even like Jeremy Camp was there, this lady, Marcela Gandara, who's an incredible artist. And so I was playing, and before I got up on stage, it was at a baseball stadium in Mazatlan, Mexico. I took a picture with a kid in a wheelchair, and he had cerebral palsy. I didn't know that, I had no idea that there was an American girl from Ohio working in this with an organization called Back to Back out of Cincinnati. And she was living down in Mazatlan, helping with a lot of disabled children and kids in the children's homes. And so she just messaged me on Instagram, "Hey, would you print out and sign this picture for him?" And long story short, this was in 2017. 2020, we both moved to Nashville without knowing. I didn't know that she moved here. She kind of knew, I'd posted on Instagram. And then over the summer we reconnected, and it was just like love at first sight.
I don't know. It sounds like she was stalking. It sounds like she was stalking you.
Yeah, that's the non-radio version I give people. Yeah, she was, stalking me, but
we'll have to get her side of the story.
I just hope she's not. I'm in our bedroom and she's at the house, so I'm hoping she's not listening right now, because she's going to be like, "Oh, I was stalking you, was I?"
Is Rachel musically inclined?
I think Rachel has an incredible A&R ear where she knows if a song is good or not. I think she could definitely sing if she wanted to. She has zero desire to be on a stage. She doesn't even like doing like taking pictures very much, but she knows what people like. When I always show her my songs first, and she gives really good feedback, which is, I actually really appreciate that, because that's how my dad was. My dad would always listen to my songs and say, "Hey, this one's really good. What if you worked more on this part?" And it would challenge me, because "Be All Right" I actually wrote in Spanish first, and then when I rewrote it, my producer was there, and when I was writing in English, we were sitting in quarantine, and he was like, "Nah, redo that line." And so I wrote Danny's verse over a longer period of time, because we were like, we got to get something that really really hits, and it's true. So I really appreciate that type of feedback, and Rachel is she has no lack of feedback, which I don't either. So that we match.
The being able to have constructive criticism, it's healthy, but it's a little different when it's coming from your spouse, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. Because they, I think one of the things I've learned about marriage is that I have so many expectations on Rachel, my wife, that I have on nobody else. Growing up, and I dated, but it was never super long term. We were always far apart. I was very focused on my career, and then and I grew up in the church, so my expectation on, you get married and it's just all roses and it's amazing and beautiful, and it's I'm learning.
That's the comedy part of this show, by the way.
I have so much to work on.
Right.
I thought that I was extremely service oriented. I thought that I was very selfless. I thought that I was very generous and giving and supportive. And then you realize, and I don't think I'm the worst person in the world, but I'm my wife deserves somebody who deserves the better version of me. And, and so it was just easy to say I'm very Jesus-like, very, Christ-like when I was single, because nobody could really see. And I think I'm very good at repressing the bad parts of me. Those are in the closet. I just don't even open that. That's a once in a while thing. And then you're living with someone who's hey, you paint this picture to other people, but this is what you're really like. Maybe you should work on that.
I think overall, marriage is a lot of work, and it really is.
Yeah, it is.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I think that the work part of it was what surprised me. because I still have single friends, and like, we would all talk together like, oh, when we're married, we'll just be traveling the world together.
Yeah.
And and so it's also putting someone else's dreams. Like, I had all my dreams of music and traveling and career, like, set in stone. And now to say, okay, there's someone else's dreams I also need to work towards and support, which is really cool.
But then you get kids, and then it changes all over again, right?
Oh yeah,
Sure
I mean, I think I'm just I need to buckle in, man.
You're in for a ride, buddy.
Yes.
Right.
Well, that's good. Just curious, what label are you with right now? Are you with a label or are you independent?
I am independent. I have distribution with Capitol.
Yep.
But yeah, we a lot of the things that we do are all in-house. One of my best friends produces and helps me write, and I have a great management team. But we've been independent from the start.
Right.
Awesome.
And can you tell us a little bit about your music career as far as the journey is concerned? I kind of get the impression it may be similar to like a Justin Bieber, where, he's posting stuff on YouTube or IG stories or something like that, and just, getting recognition like that. Would you say that's similar to what you did?
A lot of people compare me to Justin Bieber. I'm totally kidding.
Wow. We're going to hashtag Justin Bieber on this. Yeah.
Totally kidding. But no, so I started leading worship when I was in high school, and I loved, being at church, and I really just loved the community that I had, and met some of my best friends playing music and worship. And so my friend Sean Cook, who has produced basically all my music since I was 18, we met in high school, and we were neighbors, and started working together, and we dreamt of the day we would get 10,000 views on YouTube, and we were doing little videos, and and so we had recorded some English albums, and it's just really fun local stuff that we were doing. And then I said, hey, I had gone to study in Spain for a semester in college, and I came back, and I was like, hey, and I read a book by Reinhard Bonnke, the German evangelist and missionary to Africa, and I said, man, I think God's doing something in my life. Like, I've been learning Spanish for years. My dad worked at a homeless shelter. A lot of the guests were from Central America. And I was like, man, I really believe that God is doing something in my life in Spanish. And so I had started, writing music in Spanish, and making more friends that spoke Spanish. And I went down to Mexico, had a life-changing encounter with God. The very first night, where, I thought, look at me, I'm going to be the next Billy Graham, but a musical Billy Graham or whatever. And just such a humbling experience, where I really believe that God was like whispering to me. I was at a tent meeting with 60 ladies and like 20 young kids. And I thought I wrote it actually in a song one time, that I thought I was the blessing. Like, I'm going to go bless them, but they blessed me so much more. And I felt the Lord just say to me, if you want to do anything here, you need to learn to love my people. Like, you're not there to, be a rock star. You're not there to, whatever. And so I stayed with these missionaries, and just went through a process of restoration in my life, healing, forgiveness, and learned to really love Mexico. And then I took a trip I recorded an album in Spanish, went on a trip to Colombia, to Bogota, and just things started going wildly out of control. Like, I had no idea what God really had planned for me. And I met Marcos Witt soon after that. I did a degree in Spanish to really learn the language well. And then from there on, we were doing, things on YouTube just went crazy. So I started going to little churches, doing like worship nights, and, we were doing 5 of them a week. All over Colombia, Argentina, Chile, places I had never been, my family had no contact with. And it wasn't like, a bus tour where everything's like we had a manager. Like, we were staying sometimes in people's homes. And it just got so big that I was able to finally start traveling with a band. And, I moved to Houston, met some of the more of the people in the Christian Spanish industry. And it was incredible. It was like, I felt like I was just like white knuckling, like holding on for dear life for years, but in the best way. I remember when I would drive into Mexico, I would scream with joy. I would just shout because it was so exciting and it was so beautiful and I felt so free. And that's what this music career has been to me is you know, and I have no, you know, I think record labels are awesome and I have a lot of friends that work for them, but the fact that I've had the freedom to not be like, hey, am I writing to go and make money? You know, I obviously it's important. I'm married and we have a mortgage and like, we got to pay the bills.
Sure.
God, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
What is the purpose for this music? And, you know, and for me, I had somebody speak over my life. You're a bridge. Like there's a lot of people that learn English, but what a lot of people told me is that there is no need for you to learn Spanish. You could go sing in English. You can go have your career. And that was like so mind boggling to me because it was, you know, for God so loved the world. And, you know, how do I love my neighbor as myself? I grew up in LA. There's 60% of the city speaks Spanish. And then I moved to Texas. Same thing. I lived in Florida. Same thing. Now I'm living in Tennessee, and it's shocking to me actually that, you know, there are a lot of Latinos here.
Sure.
You know, might not have the same representation, but so when I moved here and started, you know, recording in English, it's been really cool because my goal is to just bring about some more bilingual music that there's a joy that I learned in Latin America. And I say learned because it's not unattainable for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Evan, it's interesting because you're talking about, I mean, everything you're talking about is with regards to your music career, but it's basically a talk about evangelism when you think about it. And I immediately think about, you know, first of all, for those that don't know, your first album was Spanish, which is just wild, you know, for an English-speaking guy, right?
Right.
But what I find interesting is the fact that you have been, you know, determined to learn the language and meet people where they're at. And kind of the scenario that went through my mind is like going to a Chinese restaurant, and at like a genuine Chinese restaurant where the owners are Chinese and they speak Chinese. And then after the meal, trying to be Mr. Evangelist by handing them an English word New Testament saying, here, I'd like you to have this. And like, that's meaningless, really. You're not meeting people where they're at versus, you know, you've actually gone out and got a Chinese New Testament or something like that because you really do care instead of just kind of meet a quota or check in the box, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I feel like sometimes I feel a little bad. Like I had to kind of understand where I was at too in Latin America because you know, the idea of coming in and being like this big evangelist was not happening. Like there weren't Evan Craft events that were like changing the nation. But what I understood too was that like, that's not even good for my ego personally. Mm-hmm. Like what was so good for me was to understand how do I encourage the youth of this nation to follow Christ? And you know, I mean, there was a kind of a controversial thing where, you know, Justin Bieber's like posting about smoking marijuana and like, and I had some people call me because I did this in Spanish. I didn't do it in English. But I posted like, hey, I know a lot of Christians follow him. And I know a lot of people like he's had this, you know, this transformation and giving his life to Christ. And I was saying, hey, but still, this is what we believe. And I believe that God has something better for people. I believe that God wants to free us from that stuff. I think that this may be something that he's hurting. And that's why he's doing this. You know, I don't know him. But my point in Latin America was to say, hey, there are so many vices and there's so many things that the enemy wants to distract you with. I mean, Colombia is a country that has been, you know, ravaged by drug trafficking. Mexico as well, like the sex industry. You know, there's always something. You know, there's idolatry with soccer stars all over. I mean, you know, and I'm not even talking about the U.S. I'm just so right. So I go. So how do we, you know, teach a younger generation to put Christ first? How do we be a good example? You know, because I had a lot of leaders in my life mess up. And, you know, I had put them on the platform instead of Jesus. And so it was it was a really crazy thing because sometimes I felt like I was just a Christian entertainer. And then I would hear, I would hear stories. It was actually about like a radio station in Paraguay one time where I went to an event in a city called Encarnacion, and a family came up to me. The pastor was like, "Hey, I want you to meet this family. Their son loves your music." So they were telling me, "Hey, you did a cover." And this is one of the hard things because I did a lot of covers. So it wasn't even my music that was really reaching people at some points. And so I did a song called Glorious Ruins by Hillsong. And it says that the ruins come to life. I did it more in Spanish. I'm not really sure I can't remember what the English was, but like in the power of your name. And I remember they told me our son has cancer and this song gave him hope that he will have a new body in the future, that he will be able to run and play with his friends and do things. And I said, "Oh my gosh, well, let me meet your son." And they said, "Well, he actually passed away. Their summer is in, our winter." So it was in like February. And he said over, the Christmas break, he passed away. And so we brought like 60 people from their church came to the concert, and they just said, "We just sing the song." And I think for me, understanding, what my position was as somebody, I was able to bring a lot of songs from the US or, other countries to Latin America, to the power of music and the power that, how the Holy Spirit works through that to bring comfort. And, that was so crazy. Like there's songs that pump us up, psych us up. Hey, there's nothing that our God can't do. Incredible. But there's also songs of just comfort. And that's where, something like that, or like a Be All Right, has been able to, I've heard so many testimonies of people. I sang it yesterday at church and I saw somebody weeping while I was singing it. And I think to myself, like, there's awards, there's, financial compensation, there's all these things, but like, how powerful is it when somebody listens to a song and they can identify and they say, "Hey, I need that God. I need the God who, like, I need to be able to articulate my world is falling apart. And even though they say it's in your hands, God, I can't wrap my mind around that right now."
Right.
And so, so it was so cool to see that and, play out across Latin America. And now, to be able to bring what God has been doing in Latin America to the U.S.
When I was much younger, I went on a short-term mission trip to Argentina and Paraguay, and nice. I would love to go back. Like I enjoyed the people, I enjoyed the just the scenery and everything else. I enjoyed the fact that I could buy a cheap leather jacket in Argentina because. Sorry, I didn't.
Well,
did I say
they
that
have all the cows down there. They have like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Buy really good priced leather jacket. That's not the main reason, obviously.
And a good reason. If you look
yes,
good.
Indeed.
But it's just, and you mentioned about the fact that a lot of times when you've been in South America where people put you up in their homes, and I was like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's what happened to us when we all went down there. We're all in different homes and stuff, and staying with families and going through all of that, which is different if you're not used to living in somebody else's house short term, right? Mm-hmm. Do you still go back to Latin America? I mean, the fact that your Spanish albums are so big, do you still get a chance to go down there as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the last 2 years has been extremely complicated in trying to go. I was recently in Colombia, in Bogota. People are going to think I only go to Bogota. But I actually lived in Medellin, Colombia for about a year. I studied in Costa Rica. I mean, it was, 8 years of purely Latin America. And then COVID hit. Right. And so, my strategy, I was like, how was I going to make money? And my strategy wasn't English, but I was living here and I was like, okay, well, I can only do things in the US right now. So I started doing, I had already recorded all the Spanish. And so we said, well, why don't we do this song in English? And so, when I was in Tampa this week, recording a music video, and it was great because all of my friends are Honduran, Dominican, Colombian. When I go to Houston, all of my friends are Guatemalan, Chilean. And so, even though I haven't been able to go that much, one of my best friends here in Nashville is Venezuelan. So I'm still very connected with the culture, even though there's been it's not been easy to go, and just the devastation that COVID had on economies in Latin America. There's been few events, right? Where churches usually would invite us down to play. Right now flights are double what they used to be. So trying to invite a band down, trying to host us, it's just there's a lot of obstacles that we have not been able to. It's a crazy world right now. So I'm dying to go. I love Argentina. And I have so many friends, and that it broke my heart because they had lockdowns that were months long and they were not able to leave their homes. So my wife and I were able to help out a few friends where $200 could be the difference between them eating or not eating. And, which is mind blowing for us in the States. Like that $200 at a Kroger today doesn't get you very much.
Right.
And so, we have so many friends that my wife was in Mexico last week visiting, all the children's homes and the people she worked with for years. So we love it. And that's really our heart is, we've talked a lot about how do we get back? Maybe maybe we go live there for a little bit, but, we love it.
I love your heart, man. It's refreshing to hear all of what you've been sharing and to hear it from someone that is as young as you are. Like a lot of people in our industry, they don't get this revelation until much later in the game. And so it's definitely refreshing to hear. I want to know from you, who would you like to work with in the future just to kind of continue to bridge the gap?
Man, there's a lot of people. I've listened to Toby Mac since I was a kid, and that would be amazing. I think for King and Country are probably the most they've pioneered so many things, just their work ethic. And I know some of their family, and I've been able to work with one of their brothers on a music video shoot. They're absolutely incredible. I really respect Torrin Wells, and I've been able to translate for Elevation and for some other people, but I'd love to, collaborate in a deeper way. So yeah, and really it's really cool too, because I've been able to introduce, someone like Redimidos, who has a very huge career, thriving career in Latin America, to Danny Gokey, and they did, we did Be All Right, but then they did another song together, and so being able to, I just got to work with KB, and then, but we did Be All Right remix, which, his wife is Panamanian, so we're able to, connect on those things as well.
Nice.
So we'll see. It's just, I love collaborating. So the invitation's out to everybody.
There you go. It's official. It's official. Some of the names you mentioned there are really hard workers, like you said. Toby Mac for King and Country, Torrin Wells, Danny Gokey, all those guys, they work their tail off. Some of the stuff you see on social media is the good part, when they're on tour or when they're on the stage and whatever else, but those guys really do work hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think for King Country has the reputation of being some of the hardest workers in the music industry. So, and there's obviously a reason they're in the place that they're at.
Yeah.
Right.
And what I like about For King and Country is their style of music. Everything's different. Everything's
I love it.
Yeah. It's always a different style, and even at Christmas time, they come out with these new versions of Christmas songs. Wow, I like what they did there,
I know. I'm trying to keep up with them. They put the bar pretty high.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see who you want to collaborate with. You've already done work with Danny Gokey, and you've done work with a lot of other Latin America type artists. Who has been your favorite?
Ooh,
don't get in trouble.
Don't get in trouble here.
Yeah, no, I'm not at least the question isn't the other way.
Who was your least favorite?
I think probably one of my favorite people to work with is Pat Barrett.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think Pat is one of the kindest, most genuine people. Like, I got to go help him on his Spanish project, and we stayed at his house, and he really, like, he made me feel so welcome. And he
That's
went
wonderful.
to record a song with me on my worship album, and my whole team felt like, he asked people their names, like, I mean, was very involved with everything. And so that, that's been a huge, we still talk about it, which is pretty crazy. And, he's been taking Spanish classes, asked my wife for some advice on some, lessons. And he showed up when we were going to the studio one time, with a binder full of like Spanish homework. So I just think, to me, that type of like engagement, where he's not doing it just to have a Spanish song or expand his audience, but like, hey, I really love what God is doing there. That I resonate with that. So it's been awesome to work with him.
That's the building of great relationships too, isn't it?
Sure enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how about that? That just did my heart so good to talk to Evan today. And
he's so genuine, and
yeah, he is.
And he's also got a good sense of humor.
Right.
I appreciate that.
I think I was giggling probably most of that conversation.
Right.
But I enjoyed it so much so, and it was so refreshing. If you definitely want to look into more about Evan, visit his website. It's evancraftmusic.com.
That's right. Evan Kraft. Thanks so much to him for joining us today. And we do have some time for some artist advice this week, coming from Desiree D.
Well, the best piece of advice I've gotten was to be consistent. And I say that especially now that we're living in a world of technology and social media. When I first became an artist in 2014, I never showcased anything that I did. I hid from everyone, even my parents. They never heard me practice for almost 20 years at that point. And I said, well, how can I reach people and tell them about myself? Well, I guess I got to record some videos. Now, I don't like the way that I sound on video, and I don't like the way I look on video. But sometimes you have to go outside your comfort zone to be seen. So I made it my point to start recording some stuff that I do on piano. And what I would do is I would post them in Facebook groups, because at the time I was very active on Facebook before there was an Instagram. And I got a lot of friend requests. A lot of people were reaching out. And once I was on Instagram and pretty active on there, I would move all my videos to Instagram. I'd still share them on Facebook, to the point where people were reaching out and people were commenting, and my following went up. And because I was consistently doing it, I was seen by a lot of huge industry people. And because of that consistency, other instrumentalists in other countries collaborated with me. And I was able to meet so many different artists and musicians, to the point where people are flooding my DMs asking me to produce their songs and
Nice.
all this stuff. So if I could give any piece of advice to anybody, is if you want to be seen, be consistent. Find your niche. Find something that people attract or are attracted to when they come and see your page, and just be consistent at it and post every single week.
Great advice from Desiree. I'm thankful for that. It's so important to maintain consistency across the board in every area of our lives, you know?
You know, I like what she said about being consistent and going outside your comfort zone and showcasing your music. I don't like, you and I have had these conversations. And I don't know if it's ever made the podcast, but I'm not a big fan of social media. But I understand the importance of social media, right?
Sure,
because there's some people that live online, right? Especially over the last couple of years with the pandemic. But even what she said about showcasing your music, I mean, that's essentially what Evan Kraft did, and kind of got noticed. And that's how he's able to spread his wings. That's how he's able to spread out people that he knows in the different countries and different languages. And he's talked about all these friends he has in different cities and different countries and stuff. Well, how do you think he did that? I think a lot of it, being consistent and showcasing his music, and seeing how that's worked for Evan Kraft and how it's worked for so many other artists. I think it's really important to be, to show that consistency. And whether you like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whether you like that social media or not, understand what is your goal in all of this. In your music career, if you're a musician, if you're an artist, if you're a Christian artist, if your goal is to reach people, then this is one of the ways to reach people.
Sure enough.
My brother's a pastor, as I've mentioned before, and he's even said to me, you have to be available on all the different platforms. He's on Twitter, he's on Facebook, he's on Instagram.
Right.
Not necessarily because he wants to be, but he understands that all of his congregation might be on different platforms. Some might prefer emails, some might prefer texting, some would prefer DMs on the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And so he has to be available in all those different mediums so that he can meet their needs and be able to relate to them.
Yeah, it's true. It just reminds me of a scripture, actually. And Paul was saying, I become all things to all people so that I can win some, you know, and we have to be able to just meet people right where they are and definitely be consistent. So I appreciate that.
I like that. And that's a perfect verse to wrap things up as well. There you go. Well, thank you to Evan Kraft for joining us today. Thank you for Desiree D for those words of wisdom, the artist's advice from this week. And thank you for listening to the podcast. We have new episodes dropping all the time. If you subscribe to the podcast, we will let you know when the next episode is available. And we appreciate all your comments and your feedback as well. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Between Grooves.
Check us out wherever it is that you get your podcasts, including Spotify. If you get them at iHeartRadio or at Apple Podcasts, find us, subscribe.
Oh, so you're just trying to get the last word.
Maybe not. Maybe so. I don't know.
There you go. Oh, last word. No, me. No. I'm going to say the last word. It's me.
Y tú, in Spanish.